Welcome back to the channel. I'm your host for today, Claire Headley, and I am joined by my dear friend, Phil Jones. Thanks so much for joining me today, Phil. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Claire. It's nice to be here and talking again. It's been a little while, but
It
this is nice.
has. It
Yeah.
has, yes. And so I figured we could just start off with, as we were talking about before this, we have never had really a one-on-one in-depth conversation about your time in Scientology. So perhaps we could just start with a summary of how you got in and go from there. How about that?
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, most of my history in Scientology, I was public, but I did do a short stint on staff in the early 70s. But I got into Scientology back in the late 60s. I was in high school. I always try to remember. I can't remember if I was 15 or 16 because it was right either just before my birthday or just after. But I was in high school, and there were a couple of Scientologists that came into that little town in Ontario, Canada that I lived in at the time, and they did a lecture, a Narconon lecture at the time, because they didn't have any of the drug-free world stuff in that. So it was a lecture they did on Narconon, and afterwards they had food there, and I was a teenager, so I hung around and I started talking to these guys, and they got my interest up. So they invited me to a conference that was taking place in Toronto, I think a week or two down the road. And the conference was I can never remember the guy who started Narconon, uh, Hispanic guy. And Ruth Mitchell was there as well. And they had a pretty big crowd. They had rented a hall. I went in and sat through it. And I mean, I wasn't that interested in that part of it, but afterwards, at least I think it was one of the people who had come to do the lecture in my little town. Um, he had mentioned that there was a group in the town of Scientologists that get together once a week, maybe half a dozen or a dozen people that would just kind of gather at somebody's house. So um, they kind of connected me up with those people. And while I was still in school, I would go there one evening every week um, and have food and they would do group processing. And group processing is basically it's like auditing, but it's when you do it for the group. And it's usually pretty light touch, but when I look back on it, it was very hypnotic kind of stuff. It was like, close your eyes, put yourself into a sort of a reverie or a relaxed state. Think of you're walking into a body of water, and then you're walking, and when you wake up, you're going to be fully refreshed. It was hypnotism when I look back on it.
Totally.
Um, and so I did that. I went out there for I don't know, maybe just almost a year, and then I finished high school and I headed out west. A friend of mine and we just hopped on motorcycles and headed out west. And then I went up to the Yukon and I worked for a year and saved up a bunch of money. And then I got a motorcycle in Vancouver. I took a ride into the States, California, and then worked my way across the States and back up to Ontario. Um, and then shortly after that, um, I was kind of deciding what to do. Now, before I had run into Scientology, my plan was to go to university. My best friend in high school, both of us were going to go and do film school.
Oh,
And he ended up going to university and studying film, and he got a career in that industry out in California. Um, I ended up not doing that. I got sidetracked by Scientology. So um, when I got back into town, instead of going into university, which was kind of my plan, but I still had it in my head, I thought, well, let me go in and see what's going on with Scientology. And I went into Toronto. The weird thing was when I look back on when I was walking up to the organization, I found it hard to just even approach it. I remember it was like something in me was fighting it. I don't know what it was, but it was like walking through molasses, literally, physically. And I sort of got close across the road and I sat down on a stone wall and I was sitting there for almost a half an hour before I got the strength up to go across the road and into the building. one of the guys that was there, he said there was a group of them all watching me, wondering, "Do you think he's going to come in or not?" But like anyway, I went in and I asked for one of the guys that I had met the previous year, and he had routed me on to one of the introductory courses. Oh yeah, I forgot it. The year before, I had done a really small course
Okay.
at the Org. Like it was $15 or something. It was anyway. So I went in. This was 1972. I guess probably around June. I went into the Toronto Org, which was at 124 Avenue Road, an old funeral home, all
Hmm.
dark. Uh, Dark wood, dark red carpets. It was just gloomy. And back then, almost every Scientologist smoked. So here you have this dark, smoky building that was just like, anyway. So
Reeked of
anyway,
smoke to boot.
oh, it was terrible. It was really bad. But anyway, he got me onto this on one course, this one of the smaller courses to start. And I remember starting to read the stuff on this course. The course was the HQS course, which was Hubbard Qualified Scientologist, like one of the basic courses, and you learn stuff um, like some of the policies, the ARC triangle affinity reality communication. You do some TRs, training routines for communication, and that kind of stuff. But I remember reading through the stuff and not getting it at all. And I said to the supervisor, I said, I read this stuff and I read it over and over. I'm not getting it. And I remember clearly she said, keep reading it and you'll eventually understand it.
Hmm.
And you know, the when I look back on that, it's almost like your brain physically twists to understand Hubbard. It's like there's I swear there must be a physical change in the brain in order to understand what he's saying.
Yeah, like
Because
make it make sense kind of thing. Yeah.
exactly right. You have to make it make sense almost, and you have to twist your brain into making it make sense. Good way to put it. Um, and eventually it did. After a little while, and then I just carried on. And I had saved up, like, because I was working in the Yukon, I worked in a mine. I had a fair bit of money. I had recently had an inheritance from my grandparents, a little bit from my uncle. My dad had left some money for us for college fund. So I walked in there and I had, I don't know, the equivalent of today's money, maybe 150 to $200,000. I had a lot of money for somebody in 1972.
Yeah.
So I was like full time, and then they sat me down in front of a pretty girl registrar, and she said, "Well, you need to buy this." I said, "Oh, in order to get up the bridge and get clear, because I came in for clear. That's what I wanted to get.
Okay.
I'd read that in the book, and clear was what I wanted: the perfect memory, perfect eyesight, perfect computation ability, and all that.
Perfect
That was what I
perfect
got. I
human with no emotions.
I yeah, I didn't think about that part of it, but I wasn't in, like, a lot of people get in and they go, I wanted to help others. I wanted to be an auditor and audit other. I had none of that. I just want to go clear. That's all I want. And
Hmm.
throughout my entire career in Scientology, I never had anything other than just wanting to get to that. So,
And key question, did you, by the way?
you get clear? I got
Yes.
up to OT4.
Oh, okay. Okay. I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's a whole other story, but I did a
Yeah.
video on that last week on
Oh, I'll
going
check
through.
that out. Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's all about um, the wall of fire and body thetans and stuff like that.
Yes. And
So,
of course I will link to your channel as well in
oh,
the
that'd be
video
great. Okay.
description. Yes, for
Oh,
sure.
that'd be awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it describes my whole journey through the OT levels and exactly what I went through and why I stopped after I finished doing OT4. So anyway, here I was in 1972, sitting at the registrar's desk, and she's saying, "And you need to buy this." And I'm thinking, "Oh man, that's $500." She said, "You need to buy this. That's $1,000, and you need to buy this auditing, and that's going to cost you da 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 da." And after I'm going, "Oh, okay." And anyway, after a while, she leans, she says, "How are you paying for this?" I said, "Oh, you don't take checks? I can go get the cash." And she didn't say anything. She got up and she ran out of the room, came back with the dissemination secretary, her boss, basically. And
Yeah.
he says, "What's this I understand about you wanting to write a check or going to get cat or whatever? You don't want to write a check or something." I said, I don't know. How do you accept payment?" So anyway, I paid for it all. I paid for like a ton of stuff, and I was getting audited full time, full time, full time.
Wow.
And I had met Willie around that time. Willie, and for those who don't know, is my wife. She's been with me. We've been together now since August 9th, 1972.
Wow.
So,
And by the way, hats off to you both. Willie is an amazing, beautiful person. I love you
oh
both
yeah,
dearly.
yeah,
And you are one of the rare statistical anomalies of a relationship that survived Scientology. So
yeah.
just saying.
Well, we were I, we were terrible Scientologists, really, in the scheme of things. I always considered myself a terrible Scientologist, but we got together around then, and I was getting full time auditing.
And
And then
so
one
and
day,
so and sorry, just to clarify, Willie was already in Scientology.
yes, she was. We
Okay.
met in Scientology.
Okay.
Um, she had arrived. She came from Winnipeg, is where she was born. She came to Toronto because there was not really any Scientology in Winnipeg at the time. So we were getting together, and we were really like right off the bat, we just hit it off. And then one day, I guess about a month into our relationship, the executive director called us into his office, and he had his like four of his cronies standing behind him, and he said, "You guys have to break up." And I was like, "What?" uh no. Yeah, because it was apparently my relationship was a distraction for the auditing. Now,
Oh my gosh.
I know it was awful. So I mean, we argued it, but it was like either that or you're out, or whatever. I can't remember what they threatened us with, but so we kind of broke up, and for a short time anyway, and then we got back together when I thought this is really crazy. Um, we ended up getting back together again. And then another crazy thing from this executive director one day, we were back together. He called us into his office again. And this is even weirder. He had all his cronies standing behind him. And he says, "Okay, so I need to know everything about your sex life, details. I want to know everything." And
Oh my
I'm
gosh.
sitting in his office going, "What? I'm not going to tell you any of that." He says, "No,
Right.
we need to know everything." And I'm looking up at all these guys standing behind him, and it's like, what? It was anyway. I stood up. I said, "Willie, we're out. We're out of here," and we walked out of the room. I didn't know whether they're going to kick us out, declare us. I didn't care at that point. It was just
Yeah.
nuts. The Actually, the crazier thing is we still hung around. We still did Scientology. It wasn't a big enough red flag for some reason, but I still had a lot of.
We all have that 2020 hindsight.
Oh man, yeah, yeah. I have a million of those ones, but but yeah, I had a lot of stuff paid for still, so and eventually that kind of ran out. But and in that time, I went on staff for. I wasn't on staff. I signed a 2.5 year contract, but I don't think I was on the full 2.5 years because I remember I had a freeloader's debt, meaning when you go off staff before your contract is up, they want to charge you some money for any of the courses you did. And I can't remember. I think it was like $900 or something because I had
which
paid for
which
most of my
which
stuff anyway.
which back then was a lot of money.
It was a lot of money. I know. I know. I just paid it, stupidly, but um, so then Willie and I moved out west. We moved to Calgary. And during that first part of the 70s, when we were kind of living right near the org, we were very active in Scientology. But when we moved out to Calgary, even though there was an org out there, we never went in the org, never did service, never had any desire to.
Mhm.
And then after, I think it was 2.5 to 3 years, we moved back to Ontario. And now by that, oh, let me back up a little bit. My When I was in originally, um, my my mother didn't like Scientology, and she knew that it was just a con for money. So she one day she sent my older brother in to kind of get me out, find out what I'm doing, and get me out.
Hmm.
I mean, we were really young and still pretty much living at home. I'd moved into the city and just rented a room. So my brother came in, and he said, what's this? What is it? And because I was never in it to get other people in it, I just told him, I said, It's not for you. It's just this is what I'm doing. You go home. Just go home." And so, yeah, terrible Scientologist. But so anyway, he hung around, and there was a little conference, little talk, or a little thing that evening that I went to. Anyway, he came in, and I guess some registrar got a hold of him, and within 10 minutes of talking to this registrar, he was more gung ho than I ever was in my entire Scientology career.
Oh my
He got
gosh.
so fixated that he's been in, he worked for OSA for 20 years. I mean, he's like, anyway, he got my sister in as well. My sister's OT8. She's also done a lot she's never been on staff, but she worked externally for OSA for many years and still does, actually.
Wow.
She's
And your
she
brother is still into this day as well?
Yes, they're both in. My
Oh,
brother and my sister live 10 minutes from us, and we've been here about 5.5 years. And one time I ran into my brother a couple of years ago briefly, and he wouldn't talk to me. Aside from that, I never see them. They
wow.
will they blocked us on all social media and all that kind of
Yeah,
stuff.
which
It's
of course
terrible.
is not surprising, but it's nonetheless to me, every single story of disconnection is complete and utter heartbreak.
Yeah, yeah, it's but they were both more gung ho than I ever was. When Willie and I moved back to Toronto, we moved initially back to my hometown, and we lived there for a few years and never bothered to go into the city to do Scientology. And then one day, my sister called and said that her husband was offering me a good paying job in the city, but we'd have to move into the city. So it was good money, and I thought, okay, well, we'll move. So we moved into the city, and there was this little community of townhouses in the city where almost all the people who owned them were Scientologists,
Hmm.
and probably 80% of those Scientologists were Guardian's Office people.
Oh gosh.
Guardian's
And of
Office were all the original bad boys. It's OSA in the past, like before OSA was the Guardian's
say
Office, and they
yeah,
were all the dirty
same book
tricks.
that's now been recovered as Office of Special Affairs. Yeah, dirty tricks
And
and
all the
responsible for the largest infiltration of the US government in its history.
and Canada. They
Yes.
infiltrated the RCMP, which is like our FBI. They infiltrated the tax department, the provincial police. They infiltrated. Um, yeah, I mean and all those guys got busted, and they none of them went to jail, but they got huge fines. I think
Hmm.
they got fined like $250,000 or something. And the church itself was the only religion ever convicted of a crime in Canada. Actually, not a religion. I don't think they're not recognized in Canada, but I'd have to go and look it up, the details of it. But all those people, we knew they were kind of GO people, but they never ever confided in us because I think they kind of knew that I was like, yeah, I'm not gonna be in that boat.
Right.
So we didn't know anything until that raid went on. Willie had actually this was early 80s, early somewhere in early 80s, and she had joined staff at the time when she had a doctor's appointment one day, and she left the org, and within 5-10 minutes of her leaving, busloads, 100 police descended on the org in a raid. And that's the Canada's version of when Scientology was raided in the States. It happened also in Canada. And um, one of our GO neighbors, 3 doors down, right next to the anyway, they're all Guardians Office people. I could have a story for each one of them.
Right, I'm sure.
but but they had all the really high security files from the Guardian's office stored in their basement.
Oh my
But somehow,
gosh.
somehow the police knew that, and they raided the building as well. So it was a big mess. Anyway,
Wow. So this was at the same time as the FBI raid in LA?
no, no, this was later. I
Okay.
think the raid in the States was what, 77 or
Yeah, I think
later?
so. 77,
This
maybe
was,
78.
yeah, I think this was until 80, 81 or something.
Wow.
Uh,
Yeah,
uh,
of course, none of
yeah.
this is in Scientology's history.
No, no. I'd have to look it up and see when the exact date was, but it was early 80s, I think,
Okay.
before that happened. Which is amazing when you think of it, because if Scientology was raided in the States for infiltrating government, and then 3 or 4 years later, they're still doing that in Canada, don't they ever learn a lesson? They don't.
Right.
Scientology never learns the lesson.
Yes, no, completely. And I'd have to look what year the Guardian's office was rebranded as Office of Special Affairs.
Yeah. Yeah.
It would be interesting to see if it was before or after, but
It would have been
nonetheless, yeah.
It would have been after this, because it was still considered
Okay.
the Guardian's office
Oh,
back
right.
then.
You
So
mentioned
whatever
that. Yeah.
year it was, I'm not sure whether it was anywhere between 79, 81, somewhere in there. I think I'd have to look it up and see the date. It's been a long time since I kind of was around that. So, um, so during that 1980s, we were living close to uh, and my sister lived like right across the hall, her and her husband, and they were big pushers of getting up the bridge. And that's when probably I did the most bridge, where I got up to OT4.
Okay.
Initially, I went to LA, had some issues there that didn't kind of work. It was just funky. And I almost got declared one day when I was there. Damn it, I wish he would have declared me. I was
Right.
threatened. Yeah, I mean, it was just a weird situation, and I just had an argument with the MAA, which is the ethics officer, and he said, "No, if you do that, I'll declare you." Oh, jeez. So anyway, so I went home. I said, "Screw this." I said, "Oh, I'm out of money. I'm going home." So then I went to the UK, to St. Hill instead, which is where you can also do the OT levels, in case people are on here and don't know that. So in now I didn't go right away. I went 87 or 88. I went
Oh,
to St. Hill.
I was there then.
No way. You
Yes.
were there. What year?
I was there until September 88 is when my family moved to the US. So but 87, 88, I was on
Yeah,
course. I was, doing the student hat, which is, of course, the advanced where you learn everything about
yeah.
study technology in great detail. But
I would
my uncle was the director of training there, Frank O'Sullivan.
Frank. I remember the name Frank, but I don't remember her last name.
Yeah, he
Uh,
was kind of, probably 5'9", 5'10", dark
was he
black
was he
hair.
briefing course in that part?
Yep.
Oh, okay. I met him
Yes.
because I
And
went. I
that's Amber's dad, by the way. Amber, my cousin Amber O'Sullivan, who of course
Oh my
is
God.
still in the Sea organization. And
So I was there for 6 months, so we must have seen each other during that time.
yeah, isn't
But
that crazy?
I was always over on the AO side, and in the session and stuff.
Did you know Hugh Witt?
Yeah, knew Hugh.
He's
Yeah.
my stepfather.
My God, I can't even believe
And
that is
he's the
amazing.
person, by the way, who,
Yeah.
when I was called to testify as an expert witness in the Danny Masterson trial, he was called by the defense as the counter expert, which
Yeah.
is ridiculous because he never even knew where I physically worked for 14 years. But yeah, no,
Yeah.
he's my stepfather. He legally adopted me in 1985.
Oh, that's just too bizarre. I was there for 6 months, from January till June, end of
Okay.
June, and I think it was 88. I'll have to look it up and see, but because I know it wasn't 86, because I was in India in 86, so it was either 87 or 88.
But
Uh,
either one, I was
Either
there.
one, you were there. Oh,
Yeah.
it's bizarre. Well, so when I had finished OT4, No, at the end of OT2, I was not doing well. I hated it up to now. I was like, in fact, none of the OT levels did me any good. I was feeling worse after each one. So I finished OT2, and I told them, I said, look, I feel like crap. And they said, well, just get on to OT3. Anyway, so they said, you need to go and do a talk in the academy for the briefing course students. So I think that's where I met Frank. Uh, I went. I refused. For it took them a day to convince me. I said, no. What am I going to say? I feel like crap. Am I going to go in there and say I feel like crap after doing this level? Um, Eventually, they just pushed me to do it. So I went in and I stood up in front of the course room, and I had no idea what to say. So there's a thing, just for your listeners, in Scientology, you've got the E meter, and the needle moves on the E meter, and supposedly when you find something, the needle falls, and sometimes it'll go so far that it kind of gets to the edge of the dial. So there's a thing called a tone arm that brings it back up onto the dial. So there's a whole thing in auditing that the more tone arm action you get, the better you're auditing, the more auditing you're getting. It means
Right.
what he
You're
says is
moving you're moving through and handling
yeah,
things and uncovering things and unburdening things.
right. And he says you're getting charge off the case, meaning that because you're dealing, I guess, with a meter, the electrical and whatever, somehow he considers that the reactive mind has actual charge on it, and he calls it charge. So I got up front of the academy and I stood up there and I said, so I just finished OT2. Sure got a lot of TA off the case. Thank you very much. Out I went. That was my speech. I don't know what they thought about that. Sure got a lot of TA off the case because I was just banging that thing back and forth during it. It was a grind. The whole thing of OT2 to me was a grind. Did
Yeah.
not enjoy it. Felt worse after. Same with OT3. I started OT3 after that. I sat down and I started auditing, and I mean, I read the stuff, and I was sort of still buzzed from OT2, so I didn't really kind of, like people say, how did you react? I said, I was like kind of in a stunned mode after OT2, so I wasn't really. I read the stuff and kind of go, oh, okay, but I was kind of like not with it really. So I started OT3, and you have to kind of look at a body thetan being outside of you, and you put your attention there and you get a read on the, but I tell you, if you put attention on any part of your body, you're going to feel some sensation there. So you go, oh, and you got one handed on your meter, you're going to get a read at some point by putting attention somewhere on the body.
Right.
So then what you have to do is you have to sort of make yourself think that you're communicating with some entity outside of yourself in your body, and
Telepathically.
telepathically. And I don't know what it was about doing that, but it was like it just sent me for a loop. It made me dizzy, actually almost nauseous. And I was like, this is nuts. What the hell? And so I put my stuff down, I packed it all up. I went back to see Isla. You remember Isla?
I do. Isla Pride.
Isla
Yes.
Prime. She was the director of processing. She was the person who kind of managed all the guys that are auditing on their OT levels.
Yep.
And I told her, I said, Isla, I'm not going to do this. I can't do this. It's just, I said, it just made me feel awful. I mean, just whatever you have to do in that. Oh no, you have to go back in. No, they don't ask if you're going to go back. And then I think I was sent, or somebody else came. Maybe it was, anyway, there was a couple of people that were handling. Anyway, then was in a room. I don't remember whether it was another auditor or somebody. Anyway, I didn't get auditing when it was in the room. It was just talking, and they were basically almost insisting that I go back in and do this
Right,
level.
because of course the premise in Scientology being, well, obviously you're in the middle of something, so the only
Yeah,
solution is to keep doing it, and on top of that, OT 1 to 3, you're in the non-interference
right,
zone, so
right,
you cannot
right.
get anything other than getting through to being done with those levels.
Yeah, exactly. And so, I mean, eventually they convinced me. I go, you know what? I'm over here in another country. I've paid for it. I'm fine. I'll just go back in. So I started doing it again, and I got a little bit more of that sort of disorientation,
Yep.
and trying to anyway. But eventually, it was just a grind, and I started grinding it, and I was on for months. I did literally thousands of hours. It just was never ending,
Wow.
and um, I and in fact, the supposedly the end phenomenon, the end result of OT3 is no more body thetans.
Right.
But I, it was never ending for me. And I just told them, I said, look, this is just gonna go on forever, and I think I'm done. I think I'm done with it. So they let me finish, even though I said I still had body thetans. So
Wow.
anyway, so they said, well, get on to OT4 because I had paid for OT4. So I get into OT4, and then it's all about more body thetans, which the thing that strikes me about that is when Hubbard came up with OT3 and when he announced it in 1967, yeah, in 1967, um, and then he wrote it all up and he released OT3, which is, so I guess when he made this up, he thought, well, yeah, we'll get rid of body thetans. And so, but then he must have realized that now what am I going to sell them?
Right.
So you have to, oh, maybe there's more body thetans. Get onto OT4 and there's more body thetans. And these are the ones that are drugged on the whole track, meaning past life drug addicts or whatever. So I got into OT4 and I go, okay, fine. And for me, it was another grind. I was just kind of doing it and not really. And it's supposed to have taken one intensive, which is 12 and a half hours to finish OT4. It's supposed to be a fairly short one.
Yep.
So anyway, 12 and a half hours is up. Nope, still not done. Buy another intensive. Okay.
And
Right
of
through the nut.
course, not to state the obvious, but OT 1 to 3, the operating thetan levels 1 to 3 are solo. So that those are the ones that you're doing yourself. At that time with OT 4 though, is you're with an auditor.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good point. Yeah, I should have mentioned that. I didn't
No,
think of
no,
it.
it's neither here nor
Yeah.
there. It's still body thetans. Nothing you said was inaccurate. I just,
Yeah.
it struck me because for OT4 and OT5 are both with an auditor, and then you,
Right.
of course, you go
Yeah.
back to solo on
Yeah.
OT7. Yeah.
Yeah. So I got through my second intensive and ran and still not done. And I'm
Wow.
going, what? Because it's like you never can be done because you're not really auditing beings anyway.
Exactly.
You're just making all this stuff up. So
Right.
anyway, so I finished and I said, look, I've got no more money. And they said, well, we'll let you audit on finish. You only got a few hours left. So we'll give it to you on review, which is
Hmm.
$750 an hour at the time. That's what they wanted to charge me.
Yeah.
Oh man, so 2 hours, $1,500. Fine, let's just get it over with. 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours. And I said, okay, I'm done. I feel great. I actually, in my head, I'm going, I'm not doing any more of this. I said, oh, I think I'm done. I have no more charge on this case, on this OT4 case at all. And she said, well, yeah, you have to have a win. I said, oh, that's a win for me. And I just insisted that that was my win. And the one thing in Scientology is you can't invalidate a win. So
Right.
if you kind of insist that you've had a win, they have to eventually go along with it.
Yeah.
And so I just kept saying, oh no, yeah, I don't get those blowout wins, but I know that I finished this. There's no more charge on this. So anyway, they sent me to the examiner, which is exam in Scientology is not where you write things down and answer questions. You just pick up the cans on an e-meter, and the examiner just looks to see if your needle is floating.
Yes.
So, and I know the trick.
And looks at your facial expression
Yeah,
and
so I kind of
body
get
language
my
and all that. Yeah.
exactly. And I knew the trick how to make a needle float is you got to sit as still as you can, not move because any movement's going to make that needle jump.
Right.
So, and then I just tried to look as anyway, in the few seconds went by and the examiner said, your needle's floating. Thank you very much. Would you like to write a success story? I will, because I want to get out of here. And after that, Willie and I talked and we said, look, the crazy thing was we were still Scientologists in our head. For some reason, we still believed but we just talked about it. We said, we're not ever going to do anymore. We're not putting
Hmm.
any more money into this.
Yep.
Whatever happens, we're done with it.
And so
Neither of us.
this was mid 87, 88.
Well, we didn't have that conversation until a bit later,
Okay.
but because of that and other things that had happened and whatnot. But after that, in '89, we moved to Florida. We moved to be get near Flag. We got green cards, moved down there, and we lived in Florida for 25 years. Never did a course in at Flag. We did one really short, like one of those little afternoon courses on finance and conditions or something, and it was
Okay.
on finance. But I almost got declared for that one too, because at the end of it you have to do a demo to see if to apply this stuff to your life. And I said, oh, okay, well, I'll come back in about 3 weeks when I apply this finance stuff to my life and see if it makes a difference. No, it's Thursday morning, you got to
Oh,
attest. So I said, well, no, I will, give me 3 days at least. No, you have to attend. So I went to ethics. He said, no, you do this, or you're going to be declared. I think they said
wow.
declare, but or in big trouble. So I went back
Because
and
they wanted their statistic by 2 p.m. on
yeah.
Thursday, of course.
So
Yeah.
what it amounted to was clay demos, and just you have to demo it out. Oh, and if I do this and I do that, then I'll make more money and whatever. So, oh my gosh.
Oh my gosh.
But
I
that
know
was
these are great examples of why Mark and I always say that the end phenomena of Scientology is getting out of Scientology.
exactly. Yeah, really. I know. They yeah, I know. Had plenty of opportunities, but I mean, when we towards the end, we were pretty much out, but still had a little bit kind of in our heads until 2007 or 2009. When it was, I think it was 2009 when the Truth Rundown came out
Yes, the
in
Tampa Bay
yeah, Tampa
Times
Bay Times. Yeah, at the
series.
time it was I think St. Pete Times back then, but
Yes.
um um yeah, we weren't doing any services. We were just kind of living our lives. Our biggest mistake really was putting the kids in Scientology-based schools. That primed them for getting in the Sea Org. But we weren't doing any services. Had no plans to do any services. And I remember walking into a 7-Eleven store in Clearwater and seeing the newspaper and the stand right inside the door, Scientology written right across as a headline. But Scientology is a snitch culture, and I was so fearful that if someone in the store if there was another Scientologist in the store, saw me looking at that paper too long, they might write me up. That was my fear. That was what was in my head, and
Yeah.
how paranoid you can get in Scientology. So let alone buy it and read it. I didn't dare. So I bought my coffee, which what I got had gone in for. I went home and I started looking on the internet, and I watched all the videos, read all the stuff. And when I watched that Jason Begay video that Mark Bunker had done, that was it for me. It was a switch, and I go, "Oh, okay, I'm done." That was it. It was all a big con, and I realized at that point in time, because I had gotten in for clear and all those things. And when I listened to Jason Begay on that video, and when he talked about, show me a clear,
Yep.
and
That
I realized, I go,
famous line now.
famous line, but that's what the switch was for me. And because I
Yeah.
looked at it, I go, in 40 years in Scientology, have I ever met a clear that had any of those attributes, or even a portion of those attributes? Has
Right.
anybody had any improved eyesight, any improved memory, any improved nothing? I realized I had never seen a single iota of those gains, of those abilities, or whatever you want to call them,
Right.
in all the 40 years I'd been in Scientology, let alone OT levels. I'd never seen any of the clear stuff.
Yeah.
So anyway, I showed it to Willie. We both got out, but we stayed kind of what they call under the radar. We didn't want to lose the kids because they were both in the Sea Org at the time.
Right.
So in yeah, when do you remember when that big tent IAS event was in Clearwater? Was that 2012, 11, 12, somewhere in there?
Somewhere around there. I don't remember
Yeah.
exactly. I know what
So
you're referring to.
so when they were building that big tent, our son Mike, they shipped out from LA because he was at Celebrity Center, but he worked on events. So I would go out there and see him every day, bring him a coffee, and we'd talk. So towards the end of it, I told him where we were at, and um, and he actually asked me an interesting question. He said, because I told him, I said, we're out. We just are not in agreement with it anymore. He said to me, he said, is it the people or the tech?
Hmm.
I said, I said, if the tech worked, you wouldn't have bad people, or so. Anyway, and
Interesting.
I told him that, we just found it all to be a big lie. And anyway, so Willie came out the last day he was there and gave him a hug and told him, look, we'll stay in touch with you forever. We're never going to disconnect from you. And he stayed in touch with us for almost a year.
Wow, that's huge.
It was amazing. He didn't tell anybody. And we were exchanging videos and communications and phone calls and stuff all during that, I think maybe 8 or 9 months. And then somebody must have asked him about Willie and I.
Yeah.
So what's the deal with your dad? Well, did you ever have a conversation with your dad? Or whatever they asked him about. And he spilled everything that I had told him.
Oh
And
no.
that was it. And that was it. At that point, we never heard from him again. So,
Well, though you were honest with him, and so
um,
he knows where to turn when he's ready to get out.
yeah, I hope that happens someday. I mean, his uh, in-laws our ex-guardian's office, and his mother-in-law was one of the ones who actually went to jail. She's
Wow.
um, and when we met them, I had no idea at the time. We
Yeah.
were having lunch with them, and and he was involved in that too. I think he was an unindicted co-conspirator. So they were both fully involved in the whole Snow White infiltration of the government deal.
Yeah.
Um, and I think she was the one writing all the programs.
Wow.
Um, and um, and he was involved somehow too. I can't remember how, but I almost wish I would have known at the time. I would have asked him about it because I can't withhold myself on stuff like that. I would have said, "So, 3 years in jail? Do you still?" But from what I understood, though, from what um, their daughter said, who was married to our son, she said one day that she used to like, and I this didn't sink in for me at the time, that she used to do this sort of private investigator type stuff, meaning guardian's office stuff, and that she still does stuff like that now. It probably works for OSA now.
Oh, wow.
So
What's her
anyway,
name?
Cindy Raymond
Okay. Okay.
and her husband Bruce Raymond.
Okay. I don't
um,
know them. I was just curious. And
yeah,
do you think your son knows about that?
I doubt it. I
Yeah.
doubt it. Yeah,
That's crazy.
almost certainly not. If I look at how when we lived in next door neighbors were all guardians office people, all of them, like one, two, three, four, five, six, at least six, uh, almost all of which I think got busted. I think there were 11 of them that got arrested. Anyway, we had no clue. I had
Yeah.
no clue about it. So,
Yeah.
um,
And at least
uh,
from my perspective, growing up in Scientology, I never knew about the raids. I never knew about
yeah,
prison time. Never,
yeah,
barely even knew that anything. Well, actually, I didn't know anything about Mary Sue Hubbard
yeah,
um, until later years. When I was still in, I just knew that she lived at a house in Los Feliz, um, but
yeah.
I didn't even know that she had served jail time.
No, I never. Oh no, I might have heard that.
Okay,
Um, but it was positioned in such a way that, she took one for the for the team kind of
right.
thing. Even though they only stole copy paper, she took one for the team, so Ron wouldn't have to. Like it was all positioned in,
Yeah,
that
that the
my part was never.
responsibilities of leaders and
Yeah,
protecting
yeah,
people in
right,
power and all that
yeah,
nonsense. Yeah.
yeah.
Wow, that's
So
crazy.
yeah.
And so obvious. So what year did you then start speaking out?
Um. So when we Okay, so yeah, what year would that be? So a few years later, because we stayed under the radar for a few years,
Mhm.
and then we were living in Florida, but we had moved kind of away from we wanted to kind of get out of the like all around Flag in Clearwater. There's a big Scientology community. You can't go into it. Some coffee shops is just this whatever. So we moved south of the bridge, like over the like down to Sarasota area, and we were living down there. And then I guess because we were kind of um, uh, during that time, my sister, she was one of these sort of Facebook police where she would say, "You're connected to so and so, and they're not in Scientology anymore. You need to unfriend them." And
Mhm.
at first, I would go, "Fine." You know, a lot of times it was people I just didn't even really know anyway. You get people on your friends list. So, but then one day she wanted us to disconnect from this family that we'd known for like 25 years. And I said,
Wow.
"No, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to, you can't tell me who to be friends with or not, whatever." So anyway, a little while after that, I got a call from my sister saying, "I'm in Clearwater. I'm just down here getting a little da da da, and I'd love to get together."
Hmm.
And Willie and I our radar went up on this one and going, something's not right here. I don't know what it is. I couldn't put my finger on it. And I said, so I kept making excuses. I said, "Well, you know, I'm busy for the next few days, but call me back in 2 or 3 days and I'll see if I can get away from work or whatever." Anyway, I can't remember what excuse I gave. So she kept on calling and calling and say, "Well, I can come to you." I did not want her to know where we lived.
Right.
Um,
Understandably.
so, yeah, I know. Um, yeah, if you, yeah, because they knew where our mailbox was. And if you watch my video coming out on Saturday, you'll see what happened from that episode.
Oh my gosh.
Anyway, that turned into a big thing. Anyway, so my sister finally, I said to Will, I said, "Look, I don't want to, in case it's not funky, I said, I don't want to be the family member who doesn't go and see family when they're visiting in town.
Yeah.
Let's go meet her at a coffee shop. And if it goes bad, we'll just go leave." So we agreed to that. We said, "Okay, we'll meet you at the Starbucks downtown Clearwater." And so we drove into town, parked on the street, and walked into the Starbucks. Now, um, there's a family that we knew in Clearwater. We'd known them really well throughout the years, and they were really close, like really close. This family, and um, they all worked. This was a Friday morning, and they were all in the coffee shop. Like even the dad who just normal. Anyway, so
Hmm.
there were the parents, a couple of the kids. Anyway, so and like grown kids. And so I saw them there. I walked up and said, "Oh, this is great. Good to see you." We were hugging them and hugging them. And I looked over at my sister. Now, my sister's last name is different from ours.
Okay.
And I looked over at my sister, and she was standing there like a deer in the headlights, like, "What? Oh, no." And I realized at that point she had called for backup,
Oh my
thinking,
gosh.
that if this meeting goes bad, I need to have like I've never been a violent. Why my sister would be afraid of me, I have no idea. But my sister lives in fear anyway. She's kind of that kind of person. But anyway,
Yeah.
so she was, and I looked over at her and I said, "Oh, this is my sister Gwen,
Hmm.
and this is and I introduced everybody, and anyway, and so
So
um
it's an ambush gone wrong, basically.
an ambush gone wrong, and I felt so bad for this family. In fact, when we actually left, they didn't even stay in the coffee shop. They'd gone outside. When we left, we saw them all standing huddled outside the coffee shop, and like they were all having anxiety attacks because they didn't know what the hell was going on because we'd known them so well. And here my sister was going, "Oh, he's disaffected. He's probably getting declared, and da da da." And these people have known us for so many years, and we've been so close. They would invite us to Thanksgiving, to Christmas, and I'd say, "Eric, you're inviting us with all your family." He says, "You guys are family." That's how close we were.
Wow.
Um, so it was a big shock to them that Willie and I walked into the coffee shop, and my sister had been positioning us as evil people. And anyway, so we sat
And
down.
yet she didn't even mention your name, evidently,
No, I guess not. No, I'm meeting
for
my
them to,
brother. Yeah, I know. I
because
know.
otherwise they wouldn't have been hugging you
Yeah.
and all that
No,
by
no,
their reaction
that
didn't, they had no idea that it was you.
no, no idea. All she must have
Wow.
communicated was, "It's my brother," and then they must have thought, "Oh, somebody Van Cleef, we don't know," or somebody
Right.
instead of Jones. So we sat down with my sister, and she we talked like, "Oh, how's your Sunday?" Within like 2 minutes, she was in. So we need to talk about this. You need to disconnect from this family. And I said, "Look, we're not." And then she'd say, "Well, and you're not really with the program. You're not like with Scientology strong. You're not." Da, 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 da. I kept going on. And finally, I said, "Look, we're now. This is going to be a tough part for me.
Okay. I'm sorry, Phil.
No, it's okay. Uh, I don't know what it is. There's only a few things in my life that make me kind of tear up a little. That's my
Um,
kids and some of this stuff. But anyway, I said, look, let's go outside and not talk about this in the restaurant or in the coffee shop. So we started walking down the street, and my sister was ahead of us, and we were halfway down the street, and I turned to Will. I said, this is not going to go well. I said, let's just go home. So I said to my sister, I said, we're just going to go. And she said, no. And I said, yeah, we're we have I got to get home. We're gonna go. So she walked right back up to us, got right in my face, and she was like, you have to get into flag right now, get on a program, go to the CDMA and get on a program, or you're going to lose your kids. uh,
oh
so
my gosh.
uh, so sorry.
No, don't be
So
sorry. Are you
um,
kidding me?
um,
This is one of the many reasons that I've spent the last 18 years
uh,
exposing Scientology. And I'm the same way, by the way. There's just a handful of things that I just cannot, it
yeah.
just never gets easier.
Yeah. So anyway, we did leave. We went back got in the car and left. And she must have gone straight to flag, reported us. And I had told her in that when she said that, I said, look, if you go to flag and do this, then if we lose the kids, that's on you, because you don't need to do that. But
Right.
she must have done that because overnight, um, every Scientologist we knew was off Facebook. They must have let everybody know. Every friend, like everything was disconnected, even business wise. A guy I had worked for years. I mean, he basically to my face when I went to see him said, "No, if you're not good standing with Scientology, you can't work for me."
Wow.
So um, that was kind of it.
Wow. Oh my gosh. I'm sorry,
So
Phil.
it's all right. I should be used to it by
It's
now.
no, you should not, and it's not all right. It's not, and never will be.
I did have one guy that I knew, an OT8 guy in Florida, who did call me up to find out what happened. And I guess he felt he's OT8 and he's all powerful, that he's going to handle me somehow. So anyway, so he got on the phone with me, and he started talking to me, and I told him, I said, no, look, I realized there's never been a clear, never been that, never been an OT. And when he realized that that's where the conversation was going, he said, well, look, I'm done here. I'm going to hang up. I'm going to hang up now. Pause. No, I can't hang up my phone, Phil. You're going to have to hang up.
Oh my
So
gosh.
I mean, as bad as it was, it cracked me up, because here's a guy, OT8, top of the bridge in Scientology, the most able on the planet, supposedly, according to Scientology, and he couldn't hang up his phone.
Wow.
Uh,
He probably
so,
truly wanted to hear what you were still saying and hear you
oh
out,
no,
but
no, not him.
no,
No, no.
no.
Oh, I know him. He uh he actually got kicked out, walked out by security out of the sandcastle one day.
Oh,
Uh, just because he's just a strange guy. I was sitting having a coffee one day in the Starbucks when we were still kind of in, and one guy walked into the Starbucks wearing one of those Scientology Kills T-shirts, and
Mhm.
this guy was halfway out of his seat going to punch the guy out when I
Oh,
had to make him not go do that. This
wow.
guy was a wackadoodle kind of
Oh, boy.
person. Yeah.
Wow. And so when was this final
Yeah.
conversation with your sister, roughly?
Um, Probably 2012, 13, somewhere in there, I think. I'd have to look it up. I know that whole period of time is a little bit hazy as far as dates go for me for some reason. At the time, then what we did is we moved out to Vegas, um, because there was really nothing left for us in Florida for like, well, there was. I mean, we had our grandkids and that there, but we were like living a little farther away, and we didn't want to get any more hassle from Scientology. So we said, at least for a while, maybe we could somehow get near enough to the kids that we could maybe get to LA and see the kids, because we had both of our kids in Sea Org, one of them at Celebrity Center, and our daughter worked for Author Services, which is the fiction books, Scientology Hubbard fiction books.
Yeah. And of
So we
course,
moved to.
and
Mm,
sorry, not to
that's fine.
interrupt you, but I just kind of wanted to also mention at this part, as you're now talking about your kids, I knew and worked with Emily at the
Yeah,
headquarters when she
yeah,
was David Miscavige's steward. And my cousin Amber was his runner. Anyway, and Valerie, of course, was another steward. And Valerie and Emily, I always knew as best friends for the longest time ever. But
they were.
I never knew Emily's parent. I never knew you as Emily's
Yeah,
parents because again, in the C organization, it's siloed. Like nobody has family. You don't
yeah,
consider that anybody has family. You don't ever talk about family. You don't even know when a Sea Org member has a child. Anyway,
yeah. All information in Scientology is compartmentalized. Uh,
correct.
you'll never know what your next door neighbor is doing if they don't want you to know. You won't know.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah. Anyway, so from we started going from Vegas. We started going into LA to protest, and we were protesting for a little while, and then got a phone call about a TV show that was being done. Not Leah's show, but this was just prior to Leah's show. There was a TV show that A&E was going to be doing. So they had a whole production company, and they wanted to see if we were possibly able to do it. And so we interviewed. Went through the whole thing, and then they took us on to do the show. So all the protesting from that point on, we were always doing with all these professional cameramen with us, wired for sound and the whole bit. And we did all our protesting stuff. We did missing posters around Celebrity Center for our son. We did the billboards. Did We did one billboard in LA for I think 3 months, and then we did one in Clearwater for 1 month. And so we drove to Clearwater. We drove because um, Scientology tracks airline. Like if you book an air flight, and a friend of mine had just got one who was protesting with us had just gotten one of these restraining orders, and even though he beat it in the end, it kept him away from Scientology for I think 30 days, and I didn't want to have that if I flew in. And amazingly, the executive producer, when he flew into Clearwater, into Tampa Airport, he was ambushed by a group of Scientologists that were
Wow.
hassling him. And that's when he finally realized that all this stuff we were saying was, oh, they're not crazy. They're actually telling the truth.
Yeah, I've had
Because
that
they were
experience so many times. I
they
can't
were
even count. I know
they
how exactly.
oh, we were so paranoid when this TV show started up. I didn't know them from Adam. I didn't know who they were. And I thought at first, because we were protesting, that maybe it's a OSA thing to discredit us or something. And we were supposed to do some filming at a hotel. So we were meeting them at this hotel, and I almost didn't go. I was like, "Oh, yeah, I was just so paranoid. Scientology could breed, especially when you're first out for some reason. There's this huge paranoia thing going on, and I had it bad in the early days. So when we went into this hotel room, I had the film crew. I said, "You guys wait out here for a minute." I went and checked the entire room, every drawer, to make sure no drugs were planted, no cameras were. Anyway, I and
Which
then
is all
so it,
warranted completely, by the way. I know it's this weird. I consider it
yeah,
like it's like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. It was all warm and nice and everything. I mean, surface level, of course,
yeah,
when
yeah,
you're in, and of course, nobody talks to each other about what's going on. Nobody ever compares notes, but the second you're on the receiving end, oh boy,
yeah,
it's a whole different story.
yeah. Oh yeah, they want to destroy you somehow or other. Whatever they can think of, they'll do it to try to destroy you.
Completely. Completely.
So yeah. So anyway, the thing that handled it for me was when because Jamie DeWolf, uh, L. Ron Hubbard's great grandson, was involved in the show. He was kind of the main person for the show. When he walked in the room, I thought, okay, because I'd seen his stuff and that he was definitely um, anti-Scientology. So when he walked in the room, I said, okay, well, I'm fine on this then. And so we ended up doing the show at that point. But yeah, they tagged along for all our stuff, and then we went to Clearwater, um, did that billboard, and when we did that billboard, Scientology had all their PI across the road. You could see they had this big box trailer, and on top of the box trailer, they had a couple of PIs with these huge lens cameras taking pictures of every single person that came out to that launch of the billboard. And then all around, like the TV crew had hired their own PI, and they searched around the whole area where the billboard was, and
Yeah.
they found not a gazillion, I don't know how many cameras they found that Scientology had planted all around to get close up. Excuse me for one second. I got to
Yeah,
mute
yeah.
off here. Uh, Hope that mute worked.
Yes, it did work. Good
Oh,
job.
good. Okay. um, anyway, they left all the cameras there, partly because they didn't want to just take Scientology's cameras, and the other thing is we didn't care. They can have pictures of us and whatever. It wouldn't matter. So then we had gone through all this stuff, and it was hugely stressful. So instead of going back to Vegas, we thought, let's take a side trip to Colorado, and that's where we first met you guys.
That's
We
right.
went,
I remember that.
yeah, we drove to Colorado and stayed there because we needed to unwind. And the DeWalls put us up for a night, which was really nice. They had a little place in the country. There were deer walking across the lawn, and we had such a stressful time doing this whole drive to Clearwater. We did some protesting around Flag, PIs following us. It was just stressful like crazy. So
Yeah.
it was really nice. Then we got to meet you guys, and I think we went out for lunch. It was just
Yes, we
really,
did
really
with
nice.
my youngest son. I think he was like
Yeah,
1 or 2 at the time, little guy.
yeah, yeah. We met your other kids too, I think.
Yes.
They were, yeah, just sweet kids. You have really nice kids.
Thank you.
It was really nice to meet you guys, and um, we made a point when we got out there to do that, to meet you, and we've been friends ever since. So there
Yeah,
you
no,
go.
completely. And I will say, reflecting back on that, I of course knew about your billboard efforts, which I thought I was a brilliant idea. And of course, I so greatly appreciate your collaboration on the short-lived Aftermath Foundation billboard. But that's going to continue. Eventually, we're working
Yeah.
things out. But I had no idea about the TV show, of course, at that time because yeah, at
Yeah,
least
they weren't
I'm sure
really.
you were under NDA and all that kind
Yeah,
of stuff. It
yeah,
while it's in production. Yeah,
yeah. They weren't making it public, and
yeah,
then I never knew quite why they shelved it, because it was all done. Everything was shot, edited, and had gone through the lawyers for approval. But
yeah.
I think
Mark's dad was in that too, Bernie.
yes, that's right.
Yeah,
That's right. Remember
yeah,
that. Um, Yeah, I think what might have happened was at the time Leah was doing a show, and now she has the celebrity uh, name, so I think it was a little more powerful anyway from that. And I can definitely understand it from A&E's viewpoint, that if they've got 2 shows on a similar subject, that, they might, and her show got an Emmy or 2 Emmys anyway, at least. So, it was a powerful enough show, and it did make an impact. And for me, that's the bottom line. It doesn't matter whose voice it is, as
Yeah.
long as it's in the right direction, and that was definitely in the right direction for
Yeah.
sure.
Wow, what a path. And by the way, thank you for just staying the course. And I know that there are probably many days that it's hard, but I will say from my perspective and from having worked with Emily, she's very lucky that you've not given up hope on her. And there are so many times I can't even count when I was in the Sea organization that I would pray, that I wished and hoped. I was like, why don't I have somebody I can go to? So, I know that's not necessarily meaningful in this moment, but you and Willie are amazing people, and so thank you for your persistence.
Well, thanks, Claire. I do appreciate that. I think at least with Emily, she knows that she's got a place to go. I don't know on Mike. We've kind of seen sort of a little bit more of Emily over the years, because she's been out there a little bit more. She goes see shows and this and that. I think she has a better life than most Sea Org people.
She does.
Um, but our son Mike, we hear nothing. I just uh, um, I have no idea what's going on with him. So
And
hopefully
I'm
one day.
curious. Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm curious, and this is backtracking a little bit, but did Emily ever tell you why she went from Religious Technology Center working directly with David Miscavige to author services? It seems like
I
something happened
from
there, from my perspective.
Yeah. Well, she walked out the door, and David Miscavige sent some people after her, and then basically offered her whatever she wanted.
So
And
she
I
escaped.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah. I don't know how far she
Well,
got,
okay.
but
Wow.
they
Well,
dragged they
let
dragged her
me let
back.
me tell you something. Security has security in the C organization. They kind of have what we would refer to as a golden rule book. And I mean, not an official thing, but Jackson could corroborate this in a heartbeat. Always the rule was, if somebody's escaped once, they will escape again. And no matter how much time would elapse, that was statistically proven.
Yeah. Well,
Anyway,
we keep fighting, and the thing is that um, I hope sometimes the messages that we put out there do get through. I don't know if they do or not, but hopefully at least they would get through to Emily. I don't know about whether anything gets through to Mike or not, but if we keep fighting, eh, my view to a large degree is it's really important to get people out of Scientology. But if you prevent one person from going in, you might prevent 20 people from going in. When I got in 1969, and I look at what followed from that, my brother, my sister, our kids, my brother's 3 kids, my sister's son. Um, there's a couple of grandkids on my brother's side. I mean, there's at least 15 or 20 people just from those 2 people that came out to our small town and did a lecture on a drug lecture for Narconon. That's why it's so important to shut down these front groups, because
completely.
they get one person in. There might be a dozen family members that follow, or half a dozen, and then they get a friend in, and that friend gets somebody in. So I think it's just as important to keep people from going in, and that's why I support those guys that are out there protesting. I know sometimes it's not necessarily the way I would do it, but it doesn't matter. They've basically shut down the test center, so they're not getting people in. And if they don't get
Right.
people in, there are people still leaving, and that means that through attrition, Scientology will eventually not have people to man up these orgs.
Yep, 100%. Absolutely. No, I know. I agree with that. It's uh stop people going in, get people out.
Exactly,
It's the
exactly, and
same
it's hard to
it's
get
the
people
same
it's
goal.
hard to get yeah, it's hard to get people out because you can't even have a conversation with them. They'll
Yeah,
either run away, walk away, or go in and lock a door, going into an org or whatever, pull down the shades. I mean, I've watched some of these guys on the street protesting, and you just can't have a conversation. Even some of the ones that are just really nice, uh, to the Scientologists going in, "Hey, well, I hope you have a nice day, and you got anything nice to say about, Scientology?" They won't. They won't engage at all. I've tried to engage with Scientologists. They won't. Uh,
yeah,
Most times they'll just shut down and walk away.
yeah.
So it is difficult, even just to get that conversation going.
Yeah, and of course, there's layer upon layer of contradiction. But in the last
Yeah.
conversation I had with my stepfather, Hewitt, that was in June 2011 at my grandmother's funeral in the UK. And he started yelling at me in front of my entire family, and he was like,
No.
"You're attacking my religion." And I looked at him and I said, "Don't you believe that communication is the universal solvent?" And of course, that's a Hubbard quote that I was shoving in his face. Anyway, needless to say, he didn't appreciate that and he stormed off in a huff.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
yeah,
As soon as they think that they're not going to win an argument by overpowering you, then they'll just walk away from it.
yeah.
Um, yeah. That's Yeah, they don't really have good communication skills and such.
No, I
So,
know they don't. They absolutely
yeah.
don't. Well, we've covered a lot of ground. I was hoping to talk to you about things that have helped you in the process of recovery, but maybe we can do another
I would
talk about that another day.
I'd be happy to sit down and talk to you about that. Um,
Awesome.
and I'm actually starting. I'm about ready to start my recovery soon.
Oh, Phil, you're funny.
Sorry. Yeah, it's an ongoing thing.
For you and me both. For you and me both.
Anyway,
Believe me. Oh my
yeah,
gosh. Awesome. Well, thank you so very much for joining me today. Please give Willie a big, big hug from me.
I
And
will. I
and
will.
again, thank you for your persistence. Thank you for your voice. Thank you for everything that you do. I'm so grateful. And we'll talk again soon. How about that?
Awesome. That'd be great.
Awesome.
Thanks, Claire.
All righty.
Thanks for watching. If you'd like to help support the channel, feel free to check out the merch store link in the description. We have Hail Xenu, Xenu is my homeboy, and BFG branded mouse pads, shirts, mugs, all sorts of other stuff in there that helps us to bring you new content on a regular basis. You can also pick up a copy of my book, Blown for Good, Behind the Iron Curtain of Scientology, in hardback, Kindle, and Audible versions as well. There's also a link to our podcast, and you can get that on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you'd like to watch another video, you can click on this link right here, or you can click on this one here, or you can click on the subscribe button right here. Thanks a lot. Until next time.